Hello. Time for another our weekly stream.
Of pissing people the fuck off. Oh, damn it. Not even 8 minutes.
You couldn't make it 8 seconds, Nick.
Oh, well. We're not trying to get monetized here.
Well, yeah. Our topic tonight is inequality, specifically wealth inequality. And this is
Steve?
a topic. Yeah.
Are you going to be a Marxist tonight?
No, not really.
Okay. We just
I
have
don't
to
think
check.
so. You know what? Some people are going to call me a Marxist. But
Yes.
no, I don't ascribe to that. But I will tell you this. I'm going to be anti-capitalist.
Uh-oh. The pitchforks are being sharpened.
Well, our current system is anti-capitalist in one sense already.
Well,
I mean, well, first of all, if you're anti-capitalist, does that make you automatically a Marxist?
No.
Most people
No.
would say yes. Now, to be specific, anti our current form of capitalism.
Which I would argue is not capitalism either, but
so, but this is a discussion that's going to come up a lot in the next few years. It's growing right now. And it's because people are pissed off. They're frustrated. There's a recognition of a growing wealth disparity. And that's not just in this country, it's worldwide. That means the wealthy are getting wealthier. The middle class is getting smaller. And the low-income population is growing. Okay, there's a lot of reasons for that. But, hey, just what I just said, that's wealth inequality. Oh, there's class mobility. People through hard work can work themselves up and become move up a class, move from the middle class to the, upper middle or even the wealthy class because out of their brains, hard work. Well, this is increasingly difficult. And believe it or not, life is not exclusively a meritocracy, meaning you get where you're at according to your own abilities. Some people start the game of life with dramatically more money. In other words, the children of the rich people have untold advantages in the life success and standard of living.
That's nothing new, though.
Oh, no, it's always been this way. So, can we discuss it? I mean, the fact that it's there, that's always true. But how much is there has varied over history. And we'll get into that. So, the frustration is mainly among young people because they're experiencing challenges that their parents never encountered. A middle class or working class income used to be sufficient to buy a house. Now, that is almost impossible, or it is impossible for many. Two incomes are required today, whereas one income was sufficient a generation ago. The topic of wealth inequality is being commonly discussed. But people seem to have firmly set beliefs. And everyone discussing this also identifies with various ideologies. In feminism, we have been told feminism is using standpoint theory to reimagine, explain history, what happened by the evil patriarchy, by the experience of women. So I imagine what happened based on my personal experience. Gee, this is nothing new. There's the standpoint theory. Hey, if you're a lefty, you're going to view things through the lefty lens. If you're on the right, you're going to view it through the right lens. If you're a trader, what's that thing called? Talking your book?
Yeah, nobody does that ever on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Or you're a Democrat versus Republican. Oh, there's capitalist or communist. Those are the two choices. Wait a minute. You have the socialist, which, is kind of somewhere in between. Although socialist has kind of got, that word has got tainted. Oh, then there's the libertarian. They're for small government, laissez-faire capitalism, which is actually more extreme. And then they have this thing called the non-aggression principle, who I don't know who the hell is going to enforce that. You have a little known group is the distributionist. Little over 100 years ago, there was a Catholic, the Pope put out an encyclical, Rerum Verum or something like that. That was critical of both capitalism and communism, and that's known as a distributionist ideology. Hasn't been studied or discussed much lately. And then as to form of government, well, you have those like Nick who advocates for a theocracy.
Yep.
Yeah. But then there's a secularist. Oh, no, we can't involve religion in government leadership.
I really don't give a shit. Fuck them.
You have, we have the traditional Christians versus the progressive Christians.
Oh.
And, maybe you're neither because you see a lot of problems. Well, then you can add the traditional conservative Christians, the tradcons. Well,
they're not very traditional either. But
they have their own view of things. Obviously, you have Catholic versus Protestant views. And you got the evangelical Christian view versus what I'm calling the liturgical Christians, which would be, well, pretty much all the mainstream, the Presbyterian, the Catholics, the Orthodox, even the high church Episcopalians.
Yeah, to some degree.
And so there's divides all over the place. And then there's the one that's kind of going to trigger this wealth inequality debate. It's going to be the young people versus the old people.
Oh, the boomers versus everyone else.
Right. So I want to explore this wealth inequality. And I've picked out some videos by 3 different men who discuss this. Ironically, they're of different ages. First one is Gary Stevenson. He's about 40, brilliant guy, made a lot of money being a trader, and he's from a working class family in the UK. And you'll detect that in his accent. And yeah, he is a multimillionaire, but he has a unique take on things. The next one is Carl Denninger, who has a site, The Market Ticker. He's interviewed from time to time. He's probably about 60. Very intelligent guy. I don't agree with everything he said, but he had a take. Well, ironically, this morning I listened to something and he's talking about this exact same thing. And then I'm going to go back to the guy I've listened to for a long time, E. Michael Jones. And his is less directly applicable to this because he wrote a big book Baron Metal, about this topic, and he goes into the history and all that. So, we'll go through this. Now, I would think many of you are not going to agree. Nevertheless, you need to be exposed to a diversity of thought so you can come up with your own solutions and your own understanding. Your solution is not merely what works for you, but it must work for civilization so your grandchildren and great-grandchildren have a suitable world for their future lives. So I intend to step on some toes here. In fact, I will be surprised if we don't lose a couple of subscribers tonight.
Yeah, we do that from time to time, but we get some more.
If you disagree, you have even more reason to listen so that you can understand these arguments and develop your rebuttal. That's my opening statement. You guys have anything to say?
Well, I'm pretty sure not all of us here are going to agree with one another on everything.
Probably not.
Yeah, that'll make for a good discussion.
Yeah.
I welcome that.
All right. You want the first video up?
Yeah. You can stop at any time, but maybe we can kind of watch this through the whole way. It's not that long.
All righty.
Okay, welcome back to Gary's Economics. Today we are going to explain why the rich get richer. All right, so I was talking the other day to a good friend of mine, a Dutch guy who I studied economics with back at Oxford when I was doing my master's in 17 to 19. And when I was at Oxford, I was very adamant that the economy would get worse and worse for ordinary people. Living standards would fall because inequality was increasing and increasing. Now, this is not a popular idea in modern university academic economics, and this guy sort of was quite skeptical at the time. But it's obviously been 5 or 6 years since then, and he and I and you have seen inequality massively increase and living standards massively decrease. And he's kind of started to be convinced that I'm correct, which if you stick with my channel for long enough and keep seeing my predictions be right, hopefully you'll be too. So he messaged me the other day and he was like, look, I think you're right. Inequality is just destroying the economy. I think it's important. We need to do something about it. But he asked me, why is it that suddenly now, in the last 20 years, 10 years, especially the last 5 years, why is inequality increasing now? What is actually causing the increase in inequality? And I thought that was a really interesting question, something that was worth discussing and explaining on the channel. So I think the first thing you need to know in order to answer that question is that for the vast majority of human history, at least in the last 2,000 years, human societies have been extremely unequal and living standards have been, in most cases, very, very low. It was only really after the Second World War that inequality decreased significantly in parts of the world, here in the UK, in Western Europe, North America, places like Japan. But of course, in the rest of the world, inequality stayed very high and living standards stayed very low. But if you go back and look before World War II, basically most of history is extremely unequal societies. So I think in order to answer the question, why is inequality rising now, you first need to understand that really it is the last 70 years that are the exception. What we have had is an exceptional period only in certain places, which is that Western Europe, North America, Japan, Australia, a few other places have had historically very equal, low inequality societies for 70 years and very high living standards. That's not normal. That didn't exist almost ever, basically. It was a specific period. So the reason that I mention that is it's not actually something unusual that is happening now, that inequality is becoming very large. This is actually the norm. So I think if we look at human history, we kind of have to accept that human societies tend towards very high levels of inequality. And we have a few examples in the last 70 years of places where that didn't happen. So let's discuss why it happens, why the inequality grows, in the context of this basically always happens. And what I said to my friend was, really, it's very simple. So you can look at it in the very specific case, which is in our societies that we live in now, what happens is you go to work, you get paid your 30, 40 grand a year, you spend almost all of it on rent, mortgage, food, bills, and it goes towards the owners of the properties, the owners of the debt, the owners of the production of the things that you need, which is essentially rich people. So you go to work, you make 40 grand, you give it all to rich people, they use that to buy the rest of the assets. It's a relatively simple dynamic. I've spoken about it a lot on the channel. But this is a specific case. I think what this is a specific example of basically a more general concept, which is when power is unequally distributed, people who have a lot of power, which in our society basically means rich people, can use that power to dispossess the less powerful. So in our society, that means rich people use your salary, which you've paid to them, they give it to their kids, their kids buy your house, your kids don't have a house. But this could manifest differently in different ways. This is simply a specific case of the general rule that when power is unequal, the powerful can dispossess the weak. And this leads very naturally to an accumulation of power. I'm powerful, you're not. I use that power to take your stuff. And
it sounds very
you
Nietzsche.
can see this happening.
Well, yes, it is what he's describing, right? Those who have power can take more power because they have power to leverage against you. And Nietzsche would say that's okay and that's good. Remember, Nietzsche was he was an anti-communist, although communism at the time was only being discussed, and he was a royalist, as in he thought that hereditary monarchies were a good thing, and that they would bring stability. Well, I guess they bring stability, except I could go through Europe's 1,000-year blood-soaked history of warfare with itself. So, I mean, like the problem with the argument is that it falls apart when you start actually looking at what the monarchists did.
There were good monarchs and there was periods of peace.
Right.
But no, maybe we need a democratic republic. Surely there won't be war then.
You'll always have war. You'll always have the poor.
And what Gary's talking about here, from a secular standpoint, is there anything wrong with this? Wealth inequality. Seems like the natural way the world has always been.
It is, but there's also natural standards of justice and rights. So like natural law, natural order.
Oh, man, you're trying to sneak in some morality here.
Absolutely. Because that's what he's talking about. He's appealing to morality.
He is, but people don't recognize it that way. And it's something I said to Nick before you joined, Steve, is for a while, it was people didn't celebrate wealth. Now we celebrate wealth. We venerate wealth.
Right.
And so of course, then if what we venerate, people will chase. That makes sense. I want to be venerated. I want to be popular. I want to be secure. So I will chase after wealth, and people do.
Yeah.
No, that's not the only reason.
The rest of us just chase after keeping our head above water and earning enough money to buy a house, maybe get married and have kids, but people are increasingly giving up on those things for that and many, many other reasons.
Yes. Well, and one thing, it has to be stated for the record, these are complex problems for which there is no single solution. That's, we're talking about one of the complexities tonight. There are others. We acknowledge that up front.
Oh, absolutely. Let's keep listening to Gary.
If you look throughout sort of the history of medieval Europe, what you saw was, for a period, there was lots of small states, and then when certain kingdoms became powerful, they used that power to take the kingdoms around them. It's another example of this, This is why human history tends towards high levels of inequality, because once you have inequality, then the rich can use their power to dispossess the weak. And that's all of history. That's all of history. That is what happens in human societies. If you look at the history of human societies have always been very unequal, except for one period in time, 70 years after the Second World War, when a lot of societies suddenly became much more equal. Why was that? I think the best clue I always remember, there's a song by the Beatles. I'm a big fan of the Beatles. First time I mentioned that on the channel. Called Taxman. Yeah, one of the opening lines of the song, it's written from the perspective of the taxman, which says, 1 for you, 19 for me. And this is because the Beatles, at the peak of their success, were paying 95% top income tax rate in the UK. Now, I'm not advocating for a 95% top income tax rate. The top inheritance tax rate at the time was 90%. During that period, up until the 80s specifically, we had in Western Europe and also in America, which has a reputation as a low tax society, up until the 80s, we had extremely high tax rates on the very rich. And that basically prevented the rich from rapidly accumulating wealth of the rest of their countries. That is
Hold
the
up,
exception.
hold up.
That is the
Hold up.
exception.
He acts like this is the normal. There was not significantly high taxes on the rich throughout history. That's a load of shit. It might have happened after the World Wars.
Well, I want to point out here from a history standpoint, the high taxes after the war were to pay for the war.
Ah.
So,
Okay.
Nick, I think you misunderstood him. He's saying throughout history, there's always been wealth inequality. During this 70-year period where wealth inequality went down, there was high taxes on the wealthy. As Plutarch pointed out, it was to pay for the war. But the side effect of having high taxes on the rich was it deprived them of growing their assets to buy the stuff and compete for assets with the middle class. Plus, there was a labor shortage, and they had to pay people more. So the high wealth tax is actually a historical aberration as well.
I want to tug on this thread a little bit because I think the Marxist argument is that high taxes need to be redistributed. Okay. I'm not sure that works because it incentivizes lack of production, right? I basically, we need to take money from the rich, give it to the poor, and the poor are going to do exactly what with it? Well, we see what they do. They go and buy sugary drinks from the local store. I don't think that works.
Definitely.
Okay. Wasn't there a song about buying
and I don't advocate that.
Buying food stamps to buy like these like fatty treats, and there's a whole song about being north of Richmond and crap.
Rich men north of Richmond, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but here is the thing: from an economic standpoint, from a purely economic standpoint, he is not wrong to say that if he's trying to frame this as high taxes cause wealthy people to put their money in places where it's not going to be taxed. Okay. And one of the ways to do that, so one of the ways that you got around the high taxes during the war and after the war was you built businesses. You could invest your money in a business, and that built manufacturing, that built all sorts of things. Okay. And what that does is it forces, so what he's talking about is the other side of that. What he's saying is he's talking about, it doesn't allow the wealthy to accrue more wealth, to gain more wealth. Okay. how that was done was by saying, okay, you have to pay a high personal income tax rate effectively. But we set up the tax code so that you couldn't, so that if you did put money into business, that didn't count towards that. And so the incentive became, okay, I'm going to put my money into basically paying other people.
Business expense.
Well, call it a workaround, call it a tax loophole. These things have always happened. And as time went on, there was more and more of them. Okay, the high tax rate on wealthy people still deprived wealthy individuals of excess capital to buy up houses, for instance, and other assets that to compete with the middle and low income classes on those. Like the wealthy at that time were not buying up farmland. They were
because they'd have to pay tax on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are factors in what happened. My main point that I want to point out here is when there's a big wealth disparity, inequality, rich people have all the money, they're going to end up owning the houses.
BlackRock Vanguard.
Yeah, them too. Yeah, they were doing it.
State Street. Who else? Who's big in the private equity space? BlackRock's big in the private equity space. There's more in there.
See, I'm not big into the whole private equity space. I think that's a problem. But,
private equity is a huge problem, but that's
and then
private equity is rich people looking for return on investment. So one of the things that did happen here, and I want to point out that there's a separate wealth equality problem that has to do with boomer housing, but that's a separate problem for this. So what happened is the boomers, I've shown it before. I don't have it queued up for tonight. I probably could, but my chart of who owns what assets, right? Millennials own 8.5% and boomers own 50%. Well,
then there's a silent generation that owns a big chunk too.
Despite the fact that they should be dead already. Yes. Okay. But my point here is that chart is this same argument at scale. So the rich people are all boomers. That's one of the things that chart. Boomers are silent. That's what that chart says. Okay.
Yep.
And it also says that in a larger sense, the boomers have accrued all the wealth. However you want to define wealth, because that chart covers all of it. Stocks, bonds, houses, businesses, et cetera, all of it. It covers all of it.
And the government's going to find a way to take it.
Yeah, maybe not.
I don't know that I don't.
Uh-huh.
My argument would be that the government's not going to find a way to take it, that the people will find a way to collapse the values of it, the valuations of it.
I just thought of another alternative. Okay, the boomers own huge amounts of property that needs to be transferred to someone else as they die.
Yes.
Not to private
You're
equity.
thinking it has to be transferred to younger people.
Oh, that's not what we tend to want to think. It's not happening.
Yeah,
it's not happening.
What if it's transferred to the wealthy class?
That's what's happening.
Yeah, yes, that is private equity buying out your boomer-owned business, your local plumbing shop.
Then, as Gary says, the young people are competing against the super wealthy over the assets they need to live. So now, you're going to just have to rent it from them. Okay. Is this a problem? Yeah, I'd say it's a problem, but even more so, are the younger people going to be pissed off about this?
They are.
Well, not only are they, you look historically, I mean, because, he's saying, wealth inequality is normal. Yes, it's normal, but let's talk history a little bit here. So is extreme bouts of social volatility. Europe has a 1,000-year history of social volatility spilling over into war. Like those people could not stop from killing each other. They also had
Yep.
extreme wealth inequality. I mean,
Yep.
what was a peasant going to do when the king says it's time to go? What was the peasant going to do? Say no? Okay, the peasant just kicks him out of their little protection, and that's it. The peasant dies.
Right.
So this idea that we are better in an unequal system, I think, is wrong, because history has shown that humanity in general is not. And there's another thing I want to point out. The largest increases in human health, human technological advancement, you could call it standard of living if you want, have occurred in the relative absence of this instability.
Right.
In 100 years, we went from being able to not even fly to, not even, fly an airplane off the ground to, how much mass to orbit do you want? I mean, it cost a lot of money.
Well, is it a coincidence that these great advancements happened during a period of relative wealth equality?
I don't think so. I don't think it's a coincidence at all. I mean,
So
again,
that's
look at it.
so that's Gary's whole story. He was poor. He wanted to be rich. He kind of manipulated, connived his way to become a trader for Citibank. He was their worldwide top trader in 2011. He worked for another couple of 3-4 years, made some millions of pounds, and it affected him mentally, just seeing this wealth disparity and just the absurdities. And so he got out. And so now he's on a mission to talk about wealth inequality because he cares about the working class people he grew up with. Now, he is not a Marxist because he's not advocating that wealth transfer. I've never heard him say that.
Well, it's an interesting concept because, and let's be honest, the current political environment is utterly toxic for this idea, because everyone's on the left, they'll love you, but they'll try and redistribute. If you do high taxes, they'll try and do redistribution with it. On the right, they'll tell you you are literally sitting next to Satan for how dare you advocate for increasing taxes on anybody, especially the wealthy, which tying this back to a little bit of red pill observation, who was it? Pearl was noting, she just like looked up all the top female tradcons and Republicans, and they're all married to like 7, 8, 9-figure dudes. So it's like there is nowhere to go for this idea of sort of a, for lack of a better term, benevolent taxation. And I mean, we've talked about this before, but there is another way to do it. There's another way to trigger it. And we kind of hinted at it already with our little discussion on the history of it. You go to war, and then somebody wins,
Yeah.
and then you have to pay high taxes to cover the war.
Hey, that kind of worked.
Brutal.
Because it was terrible, but coming out of that, when the rich were taxed heavier and there was a shortage of labor, the middle class grew in standard of living immensely. And they had more political power. Of course, the family was intact at that point. Feminism hadn't quite reared its head.
Well, Steve.
A lot of factors out there.
Well, but Steve, we have a massive worker shortage right now, don't we? Don't we?
No.
We did an episode on, we did a show on this a few weeks ago on the H-1B brouhaha.
Yeah.
There are 7
Well-
million STEM graduates who are not working in STEM. I don't know how you guys define shortage, but 7 million not working in their field is not a shortage to me.
I mean,
I
another
watched
way
a
that
video from a engineer. He said, yeah, like 40% of engineering graduates do not work in engineering, do
Yep.
not get a job in engineering.
Yep.
Well, why is that? Well, they can't get a job because I don't think there are enough engineering jobs out there.
Correct.
Our economy is not productive enough to require as many engineers as we're graduating. We're not graduating that many. We should be graduating twice the number of engineers.
Well,
That's
and
what
well,
China's
and then
graduating
we
a lot of
import.
engineers, and their politicians are actually engineers, not political scientists or economics or economists or lawyers. They're actually engineers who can deal with complex problems. No, overall, I don't know that it's working out any better for them, but
Yeah, they engineered themselves into a massive demographic crisis, as we discussed
Yeah.
last week or on Saturday. Yeah, so we discussed that on Saturday. Yeah, it's look, the problem that we have is not one of, oh, just fix this one thing and it's all going to go back to the way it was. I said, oh yeah, World War II kind of brought this out. Look, it depends on which country wins. If you're going to go the war route, it depends on which country wins. The United States winning worked because the United States doesn't ever really want to be involved with the rest of the world. Let's say you get into a war with China. China wins. China's going to come in, bulldoze the United States, and do whatever they can to get rid of it. Well, okay, that is not going to produce the outcomes you're looking for because China is effectively a monarchy. I know it's technically not, but it's their Politburo is essentially 1,000 voices acting as one. So, okay, monarchy by different name. Okay,
right.
so that doesn't make any difference to my calculus here. It wasn't just that the war ended, it was that who won the war mattered because of how they dealt with the post-war period.
Yeah, who wins the next war? Conditions are different.
Always
At
are.
the time of World War II, the U.S. had a huge manufacturing base that they could switch into the war effort.
and geographic isolation.
Yeah.
Still have that one.
Now,
Yeah.
now we don't have the manufacturing base to switch into that. Russia is kind of geographically isolated with a lot of their industry, which they've already converted to war. War is a lot more sophisticated with high-tech weapons and precision stuff. So, and you have space targeting of things now.
Yeah.
And the population might not, well, less men percentage-wise are qualified to go into the military. So I don't think we have the same advantages we had before. Technology, we still have the edge. Some would say a huge edge.
Nah,
Time will tell.
Working in the tech industry, I'm not sure I'm willing to go there.
Yeah, I wouldn't go there either. So, you know what? It's not a good idea to go to war. I don't even care. If you think it's a good idea to go to war with Iran and we can just kick their butts, I'm not so
you've been
sure
reading the
about
news.
that.
You've been
I'm
reading the
not
news,
so
huh?
sure that's a good idea. They have been preparing for this for 40, 45, 50 years.
Geographically,
Digging
you
holes
do
in the
not.
ground. They got mountains. They got
Yeah.
buried
Yeah.
drone stuff and high-tech missiles. No nukes. They do not have nuclear armament. They got some wicked, accurate, long-range or medium-range missiles with, high speed that can hit a lot of our stuff.
Hey,
And
Shu.
they're going to come back. They'll kick some. If they'll bloody our nose if we do something to them. I'll say that.
Hey, Shu. So on Iran's geography, it's not so much that the terrain itself is as bad as Afghanistan. Afghanistan is just terrible. It's that the Iranians have been living in that mountainous terrain for thousands of years, at least 3,000
Recorded
years.
history.
Yeah, for recorded history. So they own that terrain. So where Afghanistan, there just weren't a lot of people in the terrain to deal with. In Iran, it's lousy with them. They're all over it. Okay. So you have to go in and you have to laboriously flush out a million different little mountain enclaves that are all, heritage, and they have, these were built before there were such a thing as architectural drawings. So you have no idea what caves and tunnels and other bullshit you're dealing with. Like, Steve must have been reading the news about us sending bombers to Diego Garcia because, that's not a Houthi thing. That's an Iran.
Yeah.
I think the worst thing we could do to Iran is actually dealing with them directly. Because then they will all
that would
hate
mean
you
talking to them as human beings.
They will all hate you because you're there versus if you're not there, they'll still infight.
Right. My view of Iran, and I've held this for a very long time, is you wall the country off, say have your own little club right there, and as long as the oil doesn't stop coming out, as long as the oil keeps coming out, we will let you do whatever you want. We don't care. Now,
that's not going to work because
I know
Russia is friends with Iran. China trades with them. So you got other players.
Yep. No, I know. It was kind of like a, in a best case scenario, could you do something like that? This would
and
be
your talk about defeating Iran and going into all those little villages. That's boots on the ground. Holy shit.
Large
How many
numbers.
boots on the ground would you need?
Millions.
Yeah, what was it? Mustache Man sent 3-4 million to invade Russia. Of course, Russia was a more populated country. Didn't work. So yes, we're talking 3, 4, 5, 6 million troops, boots on the ground, to actually conquer Iran.
Japan has similar topography to Iran, believe it or not. Iran is a coastal plain that has sharp mountains next to it. That is Japan. It's a coastal plain.
So anyway, let's get back to this wealth inequality. Let's skip to the next one. We're going to run out of time, so let's go to the part where he starts talking about Trump. I think that's 12 minutes in. I wrote down the timestamp.
And we're going to share it here. Alrighty.
Immigration at all. In fact, they significantly increased immigration. So why does this happen? Yeah, I think it's pretty clear to see why this happens. This is a very popular rhetoric. It's very, very popular to say we're going to reduce immigration. Lots of people want immigration to be reduced. But when the Conservatives actually come into power, I'd love to have them on if they want to discuss it. But I think what happens is you sit down, you look at it, and you realize actually some pretty important sections of our economy have basically been built at this point to be extremely dependent on immigration. So in the UK, you have 3 sectors of the economy which are like really,
can you stop it here?
Extremely dependent on immigration.
He was.
Fuck them.
We should have started at 10 minutes, but he's actually talking about why Trump will fail, and we jumped in the middle where he's talking about immigration and Trump's attack on immigration. He drew a parallel that the conservative government in the UK prior to Keir Starmer paid lip service to reducing immigration, but they never did. So he's going to make that same point, prediction with Trump. So let's continue.
Which are the NHS, care for elderly people, and the universities. And all of these sectors are basically completely dependent on immigrants at the moment. So I think the Conservatives come in, they kind of sell, we've really, really sold ourselves on reducing immigration. We've done Brexit. But actually, these three really important sectors of the economy basically won't work.
They're not important. Fuck them.
Immigration. So then they...
No, they're not important. Fuck them. That was the family's responsibility to do that shit. Take care of the elderly. How about fuck you and fuck them? Fuck you, immigrants. Get the fuck out.
Well,
we don't want you.
Remember what he is. He's a Citibank trader. And right. And remember, the argument over what's important is there's going to be people who disagree with us on what's important. And
he didn't say it was important. He's not advocating for it. He just said that the rich and powerful, or the economy, or the politicians go, oh shit, if we get rid of the immigrants, we're going to tank these three areas of the economy.
Right. Thank God.
And people will be pissed off. People will lose their jobs. And the people in healthcare who are making all the money, the rich people, will be pissed off. We can't do that because it'll send us into a recession. We can't do that. This is just reality.
Well,
that's a moral argument.
Right. Here's what I would say. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't, because what they've done is they've made it impossible for the actual citizens to get jobs. Now, we've done a different thing in the United States, same outcome with the H-1B stuff we were talking about earlier. But at some point, the UK version of the millennials are going to throw up their hands and say, fuck it, we don't care, crash the system. Because and you can already see that happening. You can see it happening in the United States. So this idea that you can save it and that everyone universally loves it, I think that's where the politicians have gotten themselves wrong. They've gotten themselves sideways with reality. I talk to millennials. I have yet to talk to a millennial who does not assume that Social Security isn't dead in 10 years. They all assume it.
Yep.
You know, I talked to plenty of young British people. They assume that the NHS is going away. And when you have an entire generation that's already decided in their heads that they aren't going to have it through the malfeasance of prior generations, they're just going to look at it and go, I don't care if it goes away. So these politicians, they're not saving it for the younger generations. They're saving it for their rapidly shrinking peer generations. And because
they already have a problem with their native, so like the British people, they're being invaded by Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Their group identity is overtaken by progressive socialism and all sorts of crazy ass agendas, and yet the conservatives there are the Muslims, and yet Britain is not Muslim, yet it's becoming Muslim. Same thing in the United States. We're importing all these people that need jobs to take care of crap, which we don't fucking want here. Get the fuck out. We need to have our own people with our own agenda. Assimilate or get the fuck out.
Well, Nick, is it possible you're being played here?
I don't give a fuck. Give a fuck. That's my point. I have my people that I like, and stop watering down my culture or get the fuck out.
Okay, let me point out some things here. First of all, Trump is not prepared for he has not prepared the economy for getting rid of the illegal immigrants. And you haven't talked about that either. So we're going to boot all these people out. They're doing jobs. So to prepare, we have to have our workforce ready to go. How do you prepare them? Well, first of all, you got to cut their benefits. So they need to get a job. Now, I know you're all in favor of that too, Nick. So you make them, when a person's hungry enough, they'll work. So, but you have to prepare for someone to come in, because we want the people who were born and grew up here and parents were here. We want them to have jobs. You got to prepare them. But here's the other thing you might be missing. Young people are pissed off. Pissed off people need someone to blame.
Mm-hmm.
So we can propagandize and hype up the immigration. Blame the immigrants.
It's not all of it. It's not all of it. It's
okay.
Part of the problem.
Or you can blame wealth inequality. And then they're going to rabble-rouse against the wealthy people.
This is the leftist tactic.
Gee, what do the wealthy people want? We don't want you blaming me and coming after me with pitchforks. Yeah, I think it's those immigrants over there. They're your problem.
Which, by the way, guys, particularly to our younger audience, you might not remember this, but a lot of the crash in 2008 was blamed on immigrants as well. This is not a new tactic. It's actually used pretty much every time we get into one of these scenarios. Now, this does not mean that immigration is not a problem, but I think one of the things that's happened is okay, we have illegal immigrants. They tend to do manual labor that reasonably understood Americans don't want to do, right? Like, how many Americans want? I'm not talking about need. I'm talking about want. How many Americans want to spend 12 hours a day in a field in the blazing sun picking whatever in California? Not many. Okay. So
if it pays well, I'd do it.
Well, but it doesn't pay well because it's never paid well, right? And you never get benefits with it. So okay, so the illegal immigrants do that job, but then you want to talk about legal immigrants. That, if we're talking about immigration, my opinion, illegal immigrants are the least interesting factor because they tend to do jobs that Americans don't really want to do, and they tend to do low value. I'm going to call them low value jobs. They're low value in terms of not that they, not that food is bad, but if these jobs aren't done by humans, we'll probably just invent a robot to replace them, and it probably won't be a high human involvement job in any case. When you start talking about engineering jobs, though, you can't invent a robot. You can't invent an engineer robot to engineer another robot like that. We haven't cracked that yet. So you still need human engineers, and that's wage suppression over on the H-1B side. So in my opinion, in terms of quality of life, there is an immigration problem, but illegal immigrants aren't it. And this ties back to something else that we've talked about before, tariffs. Well, I think we actually said this. If you just drop tariffs on the economy without getting rid of the income tax, yes, that does increase the amount, because tariffs do increase the amount of money that you, the end user, have to pay. And so if you don't drop the income tax to go with, you will kill the economy as people stop spending. Yeah. Okay. And that's what Steve is talking about here.
There's two theories on tariffs. One, you do tariffs for revenue gain.
Yes.
The second one is you put in selective tariffs to protect your industry from unfair practices, or just to protect it because it's a national interest. Let's say we put in a tariff on steel. because we need our steel industry here for national defense purposes and just for well-being of the country and to keep up with technology and for whatever else. Well, gee, if you're going to put in a tariff, you damn well better have the industry here to protect.
Well,
Otherwise,
especially because China
you didn't do anything.
China did economic warfare. I don't know how many years ago against the U.S. steel industry, where they purposely took the loss to ruin our steel industry here at home.
That was the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
They did that.
It worked. Our steel industry is not very healthy here.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, U.S. Steel, there was that takeover. I think it was not approved, but Nippon Steel was going to take over U.S. Steel, right?
Yeah, it was. They tried to ram it through in the final days of Biden, and it didn't work. Ran into bureaucratic red tape.
Tariffs have their purpose, and don't forget that our country became a manufacturing powerhouse because we had tariffs on Europe. We had big tariffs on importing things from the United Kingdom because they were the previous, they're in Germany. They were the previous manufacturing powerhouse, and we protected our manufacturing to grow it, which made us a country we are under tariffs. So tariffs do have a purpose in certain things. I don't know that this implementation of tariffs is very well thought out, though. Although some tariffs are needed because we were basically zero tariff and the rest of the world had tariffs on us. So it wasn't a level playing field that way either.
No, it wasn't. And right now, I think what Trump is trying to do with tariffs is use them to level the playing field because he keeps doing this up, down with the tariff. And I think he's just doing it kind of as a check. Are you willing to relent? Nope. Okay, I'll put it back. Okay. A couple weeks later, take it off. You willing to relent? Nope. Okay, put it back. I think that's some of what's going on. And that stuff, that part, it's going to cause a recession because of the inability for businesses to plan and make investment. Okay. But as a weapon, tariffs can be used too. However, if you just put a blanket tariff on everything we import, I've got bad news for you. Right. And if you try to fund the federal government off tariffs, we used to be able to do that. But I want to state something here that people might not know. We did not have a full-time standing military under tariff-only regimes.
That's true. Here's the other thing. Back to the topic today, wealth inequality. If you impose tariffs, it's on stuff you use every day.
Mm-hmm.
Consumables.
Yes.
Poor people, middle-class people buy consumables. So do rich people. But a bigger portion of my income goes to buying those things. The portion of their income that goes to sustaining their day-to-day needs is trivial. Therefore, tariffs end up a greater tax on lower income people than on high income people, which increases wealth inequality, or tends to. Unless the tariffs cause the jobs, the manufacturing, high value jobs to come back here. Well, then it will, have some positive impact on working class, middle class people. But I'm not seeing that yet. I'm not seeing that investment.
You won't.
Maybe it'll happen, but it'll take years.
Yeah. That's
higher uses of higher interest and instances of usury among all targeting lower class income people.
Right, because the lower class people are forced to buy the same consumables now at increased rates, which means they're going to lean on credit harder. And we're already seeing that in the raw credit data. We get a monthly report of credit usage, and it's going up pretty quick. So, but Steve, what you're talking about is, Well, it's not a problem if the businesses invest the money back in the economy. Well, that's exactly what I was saying earlier about, Henry Ford and all of that. High taxes on the wealthy if they produce, if they force wealthy people to invest their money in building stuff, it's actually really good. It's a powerful tool to build up the economy. But if it's just high taxes for the purpose of handing free shit to the poor people, you destroy your economy. This is
So, yeah, we can get into this. I'll just paraphrase what Gary's going to say for the rest of this. It's important for Trump to talk about the immigration and doing something about the immigrants because he needs to blame them. But he's a wealthy guy. He has wealthy friends. They actually make money off the immigrants because the immigrants, they use houses. They create demand for things. And so if you boot out the immigrants, now you don't have workers, and now you're going to have you're going to have an increase in the shortage of labor. Wages might have to go up. So it doesn't really suit the wealthy to actually get rid of the immigrants. You have to talk about it and, pound your fist on the table and pretend to be doing something but not really do anything, because you need the problem to continue because you're actually making money off of that.
Well, again, this is a complex problem. So there's multiple issues.
Yes.
It's not just one. So they can highlight one while acting like they're doing something while ignoring the rest.
Exactly. Well, and that's why I said I think legal immigration is the bigger problem, because what they're doing is they are pounding the table on the illegal immigrants, and they can rightly say that these people are illegal and they shouldn't be here. And I agree with all of that. Right. But they're doing so while very studiously ignoring the wage suppression of legal immigration and what that's done to the American people.
Nobody's even talking about that. Well, the H-1B, they were talking about it, but that's young people on Twitter.
Yeah.
The mainstream media, they talked about the kerfuffle.
Yes.
But they never really talked about what it means, why it's important, what the problem is.
Well, most of their talking about it was they were kind of laughing at Elon. Like the sum total of them talking about it was laughing at Elon blowing up on Twitter. Like, and they were just giddy about that because it was Elon making an ass of himself, and the media is desperate for anything that makes Elon look like an ass of himself.
So it's the entertainment value.
Exactly. Yes. That was their whole interest in it. Notice how they never talked about the actual grievance that was brought up by the American people who learned about this. They didn't talk about that. And so, I'm still involved with the H-1B community that brought that up, and they're getting incensed at this administration. And that's a problem for this administration, because one of the things that I've learned is that MAGA is not Democrat or Republican. MAGA is a thing unto itself. They will caucus with whoever gives them what they want. Okay? They have no loyalty to the old system, which means that you can, in fact, Trump just today lost a Senate election. There was a special election for a senator in, I can't remember. I want to say Wisconsin, but I could be wrong. And he lost it today. The MAGAs didn't show up. And this is today, Wednesday, March 26th. It was a special election, and he lost.
It's predictable. I predicted it. I said, what was it? Everybody's riding high with Trump. Come end of February, March, we'll hit the disillusionment phase.
That was GAPS. That was our GAPS episode, by the way.
Have you been keeping track of how many people have been arrested for stealing money and all the crap going on? I have.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm trying to think. Well, no, I haven't, because there hasn't been anything to keep track of.
So all this, we're cleaning up things. Gee, if somebody did something wrong, wouldn't they be arrested? If I did something wrong, or a woman said I did something wrong, and they knock on my door immediately. So, oh, gee, nobody's gone to jail. Oh, gee, the Epstein list really wasn't released. Oh, gee, you've cleaned up a few million here or there, but we need billions cleaned up. Where's that going? Oh, and the illegal immigrants? Gee, yeah, okay, maybe you've cut off the border a little bit, but what are you doing about the ones here? What are you doing, Trump? Oh, wait. You're rabble rousing, talking peace, and then bombing Houthis. This makes no sense.
Well, it's interesting because in American history, it's actually very common when you're floundering on domestic policy, you start a little beef outside the borders.
Yep.
And
one way to unite a people is have a common enemy.
The strategy is called a short victorious war. It was a Russian general, Vyacheslav von Pleve, back when they were still intermarrying with the Germans a lot. So this would be about 1905. And it's actually why Russia started the war of 1905 that they got their asses handed to them on. It's called, the actual strategy is called diversionary foreign policy. You divert the attention away from how bad things are internally to the country. And
for those of you who don't know history, that was a war with Japan.
Yes. That's sorry.
And
I didn't say that.
And
yes,
the British funded Japan, or supported whatever. So, yeah, that was another war between Russia and proxy Britain. Wait, the Crimean War. Oh, wait, that was Russia against Britain. Oh, wait, the Ukraine War. Oh, man. Who's really pushing to keep that thing going? Oh, yeah, that'd be Britain. There's a big rivalry there, folks.
There is. Now, I mean, we did the whole geopolitics episode, and I don't need
it was also in the Civil War as well.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
The Brits supported the South and the
and the Russians came in
and said no
to support the Yankees.
Yep.
And that really
said, if you get directly involved in this, Britain, we're gonna get involved too.
To some extent, this is just the typical bare knuckle geopolitics that existed before World War II. So there's a part of it that I look at and I go, yeah, this is just history restarting itself. But
it's been 80 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I agree. But the thing about the war, and I had an interaction with somebody, and I don't, and I mentioned this.
Are we getting off topic a bit?
Well, because what this person
bring us back.
Well,
I don't mind. This excursion.
Well, because what this person said was they were basically trying to say war in Ukraine bad, war in Iran good, and I basically told him to shove it. I don't want either of your wars. Right. And I mean, it's the same. And because what it came down to is Democrats started the war in Ukraine. Well, that makes it bad, but it's okay. It's good for us to go to war with Iran because free trade. And I'm sitting here going, we do not need yet another sandbox adventure. We've done 2 of them in the past 35 years. Yeah, we didn't lose.
Okay, I'm going to bring this back on now.
But we don't need it.
Wealth inequality. Now, the 3 of us demonstrate why this topic is so hard to discuss because someone brings up something else and you end up chasing rabbits. And you can't stay on topic. Wealth inequality. Yes, there's all these other factors. Yes, it's complicated. Yes, they're all interrelated. But let me ask the two of you one question. We have Trump in there. There will be changes to the tax policy.
Yes, sir.
Do you think he's likely to increase the taxes on the wealthy or decrease
No.
taxes on the wealthy?
Decrease.
Decrease.
So Trump, I think we're all three in agreement here. Trump is not going to address wealth inequality.
You know, Steve, it's actually something that I've seen and other demographers have seen in the millennial generation. And it's why the millennial generation is so frequently maligned as being Marxist, communist, leftist, etc. And the millennial generation really does latch onto some of that Marxist wealth taxation rhetoric. Because I do believe that the millennials as a group, while I doubt they could articulate it, understand that, particularly over the evidence of the last, call it 60 years, that these low taxes have not helped them and their generation and their people, but the wealth concentration certainly seems to have exploded quite a bit as taxes have come down.
Who was the big boomer president?
Okay. Here's my solution. Teddy Roosevelt on both companies and the government itself, the government bureaucracies.
Okay.
Trust busting. Monopoly busting.
That needs to be done. And the millennials are broadly for that, by the way, when they poll on them. Trust busting is going to come back.
Because not only the corporate, we have corporate capital, crony capitalism run by corporates that throw small businesses under the bus where they can't afford all the legal fees and they get crushed.
Yep.
Also, you have all this fucking regulations and shit that purposely favors big corp, contrary to the little farmer man.
Yep.
Right. And that favors the wealthy so they can get more wealthy. But I want to point something out, a historical fact. Okay, I graduated from high school in 1981. Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980? 1980, took office January 1981. You've heard of this thing called Reaganomics and the great boom that happened. Well, the boom was probably ready to happen regardless. But you also heard about, Reagan, what kind of economics? Trickle down economics.
Yep.
Okay, so Reagan, that's when the tax rate of the rich was dramatically cut to stimulate the economy. Okay, kind of worked. It certainly stimulated the financial part of the economy. The stock market went up. But gee, when did industry leave the U.S.? Well, it was leaving in the 70s. But in the 80s,
Nixon,
holy shit, big time. Companies left. And eventually you left.
Nixon went to China. It took a few years after that to really pick up the movie industry takes time, right?
Yeah.
But cutting the tax on the wealthy did not increase investment in U.S. businesses. As Plutarch said before, when you tax the wealthy, they put their money into businesses.
Yep.
When you don't tax them personally, they have no reason to invest because they're going to invest in financial assets. And they made a shit ton of money through the financialization and the stock market. It's not gone down. Well, what was it in 1980? I believe the Dow was at 800.
That sounds about right. I'm
And
looking it up.
then I think by 87 was up to 2,700, and it dropped dramatically, but that was a V bottom, and it just kept going from there. So
Yeah. So it peaked in there was a peak in the 60s for the Dow. Looking at the chart here.
it was just through the 60s and 70s, it was just choppy. It
Yeah.
was a lot of up and down, but it was flat on average.
Yeah, so the Dow peaked in about we'll call it roughly 65. At about 10,000, and then it comes way down.
10,000, 1,000.
Yeah. Am I looking at it? Dow Jones. Okay, I might be looking at it in a different. Oh, I'm looking. It's inflation adjusted. Sorry.
Okay.
So
It was 1,000.
Yeah.
Or
It was
around
1,000.
800 to 1,000.
Right, and so inflation adjusted, then it comes all from 65 to 85. That's by the way the great inflation of the 70s mostly comes all the way down to inflation adjusted about 2,500, and it hasn't looked back since 1980. Like it bottoms like the month that Reagan gets put in, it bottoms and it does not look back.
So all our wealth, well, I shouldn't say all, the vast majority of the wealth in our economic boom over the last 45 years has been financialization. It has not been production. And okay, when I graduated from high school, the chip industry was in the US.
Silicon Valley.
Designed it, we made it, it was all here. And it wasn't long until they just shipped all the production overseas. Why the hell did you do that?
Cheaper.
It was automatic. It was even automated at the time. Yeah, you were paying high wages, but there weren't tons. Relatively speaking, there weren't a lot of people employed in it. It was phenomenal jobs. We should have kept that here and advanced the industry. Man, it was like the shining star of the future of the U.S., and we shipped it out.
Because we could get it cheaper elsewhere. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have a lot of jobs, but one of the easiest factors for a large corporation to control for is their head count. One of the things that the H-1B community has been doing is tracking tracking the layoffs and H-1B. And what we're seeing is that companies like Amazon, they announced, oh, we're going to fire X number of people. Like it wasn't Amazon, it was Google or somebody like that. It was one of the big techs. They said, oh, we're going to fire 9,000 people. And then sure enough, there's 9,000 H-1B applications coming. So March's H-1B application period, by the way. And so then there's 9,000 H-1B applications sitting on the other side of it. Like,
imagine that.
Right, exactly.
Let me tell you a little anecdotal story. In Fargo, they built a huge Amazon warehouse. I don't know, relatively speaking, with their other huge houses, how it ranks, but it's damn big.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to employ, I don't know, hundreds of people, 400, 600, I don't know what.
It's somewhere in that range for these.
And then I asked somebody, well, how's it doing? Oh, they're not doing that anymore. They couldn't get enough people. Well, you know what their pay is. It's not that great. Their working conditions are pretty horrendous. The pressure on these people to perform is high. You know, people in Fargo, North Dakota said, no, not doing that. You can go pound sand. Okay, so it's the pressure cooker on the technical workforce is not that much different. And you'll get a lot of Americans saying, yeah, it's not worth it. Goodbye. But if you get an H-1B in there, can they say that?
Nope. They
Nope.
get sent home if they do.
So you basically have an indentured servant.
Yep. No, it's a literal indentured servant. Like that is the technical definition of an indentured servant.
So I think we should go listen to Carl Denninger. That's a shorter clip, but he kind of outlines this. And he's the guy who's my age.
All right, Steve. What's the title on that one? Is that Baron Metal or is that the Lutnick?
No, it's the one above
Okay,
that.
okay, found it.
Yeah, Baron Metal's E. Michael Jones. I know that. That's his thing.
It's right under Carl Denninger. It's the YouTube one,
Yeah.
which is going to start at the time that I wanted to.
All righty. There we go.
And this is basic logic. So if you come into the United States illegally, you don't have due process rights. You never acquired them because you weren't here lawfully in the first place. You can't acquire something if you got it through fraud. If you come into the United States and say that you're here to study, you're a student, and your real reason for coming here is to agitate on the Israeli-Palestine issue, your visa is void. Now, I have to substantiate that that's what you did, but once I do that, your visa is void because you committed fraud when you got it. You never had a visa. I don't have to revoke it. It never existed. And this is the issue today. When you look at all the spending that's going on in healthcare, in all these other areas, all this stuff that Doji is supposedly going after, it's not unlawful because it's wasteful. It's unlawful because you never had a right to it in the first place because you stole it. It was fraudulent.
What's the
And you
timestamp
never
here?
gain the right to anything, no matter how much.
7:20.
17, and we started at
Okay,
13,
we're gonna go to 22 or something. So
22. Okay.
yeah, he'll get to
Time
the
passes.
part I want.
Okay.
When you commit a fraud.
Oh, damn commercial.
Up a bank and I don't get caught for 10 years and I stole $10,000. The $10,000 is not mine, and it doesn't matter how long I get away with it. If I get
Just
caught
skip ahead a
10
little
years
bit.
later, I still don't get to keep the 10. We add into that where what makes right, which is that, so all these people that came into the United States illegally, several million of them during Biden's administration, they have no due process rights. And they cannot acquire them because they were never here lawfully in the first place. So they can be summarily deported, period. That's it. You do have to substantiate that they actually came into the United States illegally in the first place. But that's all.
Now we're getting to the good part.
Once you reach that threshold, from a perspective of law, the question is settled. So let's say you do that. What does that do? Well, it decreases demand for housing. Because
I have been saying that since this whole immigration fight came up. I've been saying that there was going to be a decreased demand for housing. I was telling a buddy of mine in the construction business to get out of that and do something else with his life because housing's in
Right.
for a multi-generational crash. and we're talking about just on the illegal side, it's estimated, but we're talking about tens, more than 20 million people. That is at the low end of at the low range of the estimates. You're talking about 5 million units, 5 to 10 million units that are no longer needed. There's nobody.
That's if Trump actually gets rid of them.
Oh,
Right.
Nick.
Yep,
Nick.
let's keep going. We'll talk about that in a bit.
All those people had a place to live and now they don't. Okay. It increases demand for labor because all those people had jobs that Americans could have done. And now they don't. Supply and demand is the basic law of economics. It is always true. So two things happen. Demand for all things that consumers use. Housing, transportation, food, energy, all these things. The demand falls because you take 10 million people, 15 million people, 20 million people, 5 million people, whatever the number is, and they leave. At the same time, the supply of labor falls. So what happens? The price goes up because there's less supply. So, you know, we've had this debate about this thing called a K-shaped economy, right? You heard about this? Supposedly K-shaped?
I have heard about it.
Since 2008. The people on the top, they're making a hell of a lot of money, right? All the people on the bottom are getting screwed. What happens when you do this? And what happens to asset prices, which is where all these guys' money is? Would you mind telling me who, other than these guys, by the way, that's like the top 1% of Americans in income and assets, who else thinks this is bad, going from this to this?
This episode is vux.net/coffee and a mic. Which he's shrinking for people that are listening on the audio. He's shrinking. He's making it smaller. He's bringing the K down to so the fingers are touching.
Right. So the people on the lower end pay less for the things that they need, and they get paid more. That's two goods, right? That's two benefits. Who gets it in the ass? The guys on the top that see their asset prices go to hell. You know why they don't want that to happen, right?
That's your 22 and a half there.
Okay. Yeah. Is he right?
Economically, he is spot on. There's absolutely nothing incorrect about what he said there. From a K-shaped economy, I've heard about that since I got involved with trading and macroeconomics, and that's, you know, we were talking about immigration, and everyone has been noticing that the deportation numbers, like Biden was importing, it would have been a very slow day. The best day we've had of deportations, that was a very slow day for the import machine. You know, I think we touched like 10,000 on one day, and everyone was like, "Yay, we deported 10,000 today." And it's like, yeah, that was like a federal holiday during the Biden administration import regime. We are, and I suspect now, yes, I understand, to you tradcons and righties and whatnot, I understand that Trump's getting a lot of a pushback inside the federal government, and the state agencies are getting tipped off, about what the ICE is doing. I understand all those things are true. But at the end of the day, Trump could be doing so much more.
Hey, my question is this all kabuki theater?
Yeah. If you have to ask, the answer is yes.
I mean, Trump identifies with the rich, the elite. They make
Yes, he
a
does.
lot of money off of the immigrants being here because they're renting the homes for them. They're getting cheap labor. They're kind of skimming some off of the government transfers to pay them money. There's huge amounts of EBT or whatever the hell transfers. There is vast amounts of money being made off of the immigrants.
Oh, goodness, yes.
So really, are they better off as a scapegoat, pretending and pointing at them? But do they really want to solve the problem?
No, they don't. It is, and he's describing why it's in their benefit not to.
It's like the demographic problem. They still can't just face the fucking facts.
Yes,
because it'll
Nick,
cost them
yes.
too much politically.
Yes,
And
exactly.
what do politicians do but cling to power to the utmost, even if they
But
have
the
to sell
politicians-
bullshit to people?
The politicians serve their masters. Their masters are not the people.
Yeah.
Right.
It's their contributors, the rich people who pull the strings. And yeah, in the end, they don't really care about their popularity because they'll be well taken care of.
Even if
They'll
get
have
voted
their
out.
security.
Yep.
They'll have their gated community.
Yep.
And while they've been in there, their wealth can go from sub 1 million up into the 10 to $50 million in a matter of 10 years.
Yep.
When they're making what, 150,000 to 200,000?
Roughly,
I
yeah.
don't know.
It depends
It's
on
in
where
there.
you are. But yeah.
It makes there is no means, logical means that they can do that unless they're trading insider. But that's
that
legal
happens.
for them.
Yep.
And then they're getting vast political contributions, and they know where their bread is buttered, and they don't care if they lose popularity because they're set for life and their
I'm
children.
going to do a TradCon ETN right here, Steve. Expose the narrative of the TradCons. Hey guys, well, Trump was, what happened to Trump twice before he got elected?
Long range hole puncher attempts.
Yeah. And you think he cares anymore about what happens? And is he just going to pull the rug out from everything? Because, F those guys. In part, I think that's true. But also he knows the system that benefits his family. He's old and he wants his family to be set up. His loyalty is not to the people, but to his family.
And I want to say something here. In general, loyalty to your family is not a terrible thing. However, there is a bit of an exception here, and that's when you're leading a nation. Okay. The reason I say that is because, you look at the Bible. It talks about the good kings and the mediocre kings and the bad kings, as Nick said earlier on. Right? Yeah. Okay. The good kings are the ones who looked after the nation, who put the nation and the welfare of the people ahead of the welfare of themselves. The mediocre kings kind of recognized that they needed to do some of that, so they gave themselves some, but they recognized that they needed to not go too far. And then you get to the bad kings where they just looked at it and said, "Fuck everyone, I got mine, haha." Basically.
So we just had a bad king. Now we have a mediocre king, basically.
Well, you can look at this in marriage. Man is the glory of God. Women is the glory of man. Man does not report to his wife. He's really not responsible to her. He's responsible for her. His responsibility is to God. His conduct is governed by God, not by her. Her conduct is governed by him. And so, yeah, and the kings that were good leaders were moral to God. I have been entrusted with protection of my people, but I'm accountable to God. And so if I use my power to solely benefit myself and hurt the people, I'm going to have to answer for that someday. So and it's the same thing with the husband and wife. If I'm accountable to God for my actions to my wife, I am not accountable to my wife.
No, he just needs to give Paula White another $1,000.
That was still bothering you, huh, Nick? I guess you haven't moved past that one yet, Nick. Oh boy, we're gonna have to work with it some more, guys. I'm just
well. We've uncovered that this is a complicated topic. That and the three of us are in agreement that wealth inequality is a problem. You could handle it the way Carl Deniger said, but no, that would hurt the elite, the rich, in the short term, and maybe even in the long term. They wouldn't be so much. They would lose wealth.
Oh yeah.
So it's unlikely to happen. Oh, we could just tax them at a much higher rate. That would accomplish something. And like Plutarch says, that would cause them to put their money into businesses, which is somewhat sheltered, because then they can reinvest, and that would boom things. I don't think that's likely to happen under Trump, because if anything, he's going to lower the tax rate of the wealthy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, for
he won't
for
lower
the last
usurious interest rates, though, will he?
No.
The capping of the interest rate thing. Well, I don't know. Do you want to vote for an AOC sponsored bill? Like, there's the political optics of that too.
Fuck.
I mean, but she's sponsoring that. Steve, I want to make a note. There's another way to lower the asset values of these people. There's another way to do it.
Okay.
But it's a little more chaotic than what we've been discussing right now.
Sure. What is it?
A market crash would do it. It lowers it because what we have to understand about the wealth of wealthy people is that it isn't cash sitting in a bank account. It is a number on a screen for the portfolio of the stocks and bonds and shit that they hold. Okay.
Correct.
So the other way to do this, to fuck the rich, is to fuck the stock market. Well, here's the thing. A lot of people will say, oh, well, I have nothing to, I have nothing to sell, or I have very little to sell, so I can't crash the stock market. That's correct. You, the people, cannot crash the stock market. The entire people don't own enough of it. Okay. BlackRock, Vanguard, etc. They all own more of it than you ever will. But
yeah,
you can create the economic conditions where that crash happens no matter what. And I think that's what we're actually seeing today, because I think people understand that Trump is still he's a rich guy, and he's in the rich guy club. They might not all like him up there, but he's in that club. But we keep talking about men walking away from relationships, and they are. Well, we're also seeing men just not interested in going out and working in high value jobs. All these women complaining about, oh, well, all he wants to do is work his Burger King job and sit at home and play PlayStation. And he doesn't.
Smart.
An alternative.
Because the harder he works, the more money she's going to take from him in her divorce. So
yeah,
a lot of these guys are saying, damn, I'm not going to work that hard just so she can fleece me in the future.
Right. But what
she wants me, she can love me as a poor man.
Right. But what does that do to the economy? Well, this guy's talking about a labor shortage that drives the price of things up. If the price of things goes up, then the stock prices have to come down because the sales are going to crash, because the same guy making the Burger King salary can't afford those increased prices.
And she can't afford all the handbags, man.
Well, yeah, that too. Well, hey, women consume more than men do by a lot. And I'm talking consumables here.
So we listened to Gary Stevenson, and he wrote a book, The Trading Game. I recommend this book. It's how he got into trading, kind of the story of his life. He is a brilliant guy. Grew up working class. Yeah, he had to finagle his way in there, but he's got some good ideas. Well, you listen to Carl Denninger, he's got some good ideas. We talked about how complicated this is. For the concluding one, I want to go to E. Michael Jones. He wrote this book.
That book.
Barren Metal.
Yeah.
The history of capitalism as the conflict between labor and usury. And
he's a papist author I actually like.
And from
Nick.
and the title Barren Metal comes from Shakespeare. The Merchant of Venice. Antonio, or is your gold and silver ewes and rams? Shylock, he's a man with a small hat. I cannot tell. I make it breed as fast. Antonio, a breed for barren metal for his friend, but lend it rather to thine enemy. So the point is, Shylock thinks metal, gold and silver, can breed. It can copulate.
Yeah.
And wealth was generally created animals, ewes and rams. They have sheep. That's how wealth was grown. But when metal begets metal, that's usury. So E. Michael Jones goes through this book kind of historically. He's from the pagan times up through the medieval times, Medici's, Florence, into the Bank of England. And, it's a big book. It's 1,300 pages. And it concludes in 2008. Now, if you want a history of economics, okay, it's from his perspective. But I highly recommend the book. And a lot of this is about property. And one of the big takings happened in Britain at the time of King Henry VIII. It used to be known as Merry Old England, a very, very Catholic country. And over time, people had acquired property, and upon their death, they gave it to the church. The church owned, I don't know, a third or half the property. What did the church do with it? Well, the church rented to the people for fair rental prices. Basically, it supported families. And everybody got along good. And then there was the Reformation there, where King Henry declared himself head of the Church of England. Basically, all that property became owned by the nobility. And they erected fences. It was called enclosures. And then the people were not allowed to farm the land because it no longer belonged to the church. They couldn't rent it. Stone fences were put around that, And they raised sheep on that, and the people became very poor. So let's listen to E. Michael Jones. That's the last one. Just a few minutes of his. I mean, and we're just touching on this, and he's not going to get into wealth inequality, but he's going to go into how property has changed definitions.
That the great inequality of wealth distribution is the result of sin. And it goes on to say, God himself bestows property. So private property, Dr. Jones, is pretty significant in the revealed religion of the Catholic faith. It's in the seventh commandment. There's both a negative precept, which you can't steal. There's a positive precept implied, which you should be able to own things. I think that, the Catechism of Trent says that government's taking your property is theft. How do we reconcile that, though, with regulating an economic system that actually works for people?
Yeah, you have to get concrete about property, which means historically concrete, okay? And the problem with Catholicism is ahistoric Thomism. I am a Thomist, but I am a historical Thomist, and you can't just have Platonic concepts like property out there. You have to contextualize this historically. And in order to do that, you have to talk about John Locke. John Locke came up with an idea of property that became normative for the Anglo-speaking world. And he was a Whig, and it was based on Whig exigencies. Okay, he was being paid to represent Whig interest at the time of the Glorious Revolution. All of the Whigs had come into their property basically through the Reformation when they stole church property. That's how Whig oligarchs became rich. Okay, they were still holding on to their property. They did not want to return to a Catholic king because the Catholic king might take their property back. So that's what the Glorious Revolution was about. And it resulted in an exaggerated form of property, which is basically the absolute right to property. No matter how you got it, if you own it, you are the absolute lord of that property, and you can do with it whatever you want. That is not the Catholic teaching. Okay, the Catholic teaching grew up over a long period of time in Germany. There was no Germany, but the Holy Roman Empire, where everyone started off as a serf. And then you gradually acquired some rights to the property that you took care of, because labor is the source of all value, and you are creating that property through your labor. So they had rights, and suddenly the Lord could not simply expel them from the property in the Holy Roman Empire, which is exactly what happened during the English Reformation. All of those Catholic serfs who had their rights were simply expropriated, and the oligarchs stole the property, and they drove them off the land, created a rootless proletariat, and put sheep on the land instead to make wool so that they could feed the Italian garment industry. Okay, that was the absolute right of beginning of the absolute right of property, and it led to the situation we are in today, which is basically you have these private entities like Google, like Facebook, like YouTube, who have an absolute right to property. This is a utility. You have no right to charge whatever you want simply because you own the railroad. We dealt with that years ago, turn of the 20th century. Now these people, because of conservatism, this is the villain. The villain in this regard was conservatism that said government is bad. If private enterprise does it, it's okay. Well, we're now in a situation where these tech giants are stronger than government because of that exaggerated notion of property. Now, Locke led to Karl Marx because they abused it. They abused their right to property. They kicked the people off. And so now you have the exact opposite point of view expressed by Proudhon, who says property is theft. And so what had to happen was this course correction where the church stepped in and says, no, you're both wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ was crucified.
Continue just a little bit here.
Between two thieves. One was called communism and the other was called capitalism. And this is where rerum novarum came in. to set the record straight about the rights of the worker. The
Okay.
man who was the predator.
Now, you know what? He's got some good points in there. I don't know if you agree with everything he says, but again, it's property and it's about the two classes, and raw capitalism can really lead to some great inequalities. So we need to find a balance here. I don't really know how we're going to do it, but I know if we continue down this path, it'll be a path to serfdom. And then eventually, when people get too riled up, it's basically an invitation to return to communism, because people will eventually have enough of it.
Well, the South understood both Locke and Marx were full of shit, but the Yankees took both.
You just had to get that in there, didn't you, Nick?
Fuck yeah.
No, it's cool. But so here's my take on this. And again, looking at the demographics, looking at what the millennials are saying, the millennials don't want full communism, but there is a seductiveness to this idea of taking from the rich to not necessarily give to the poor, but to give to the people who don't have anything. You know, like, he's talking about the church here, and taking, the church would rent it out to the people who didn't have anything. Okay. Right. And so there's this seductiveness to it, because the millennials, much as you hate them, have figured out that by and large, they are a generation that is locked out of property.
Yep.
Okay. So the problem for the oligarchs, as Dr. Jones calls them, is what do you do with a large dispossessed generation? Well, the traditional playbook is you create a scapegoat and point them at that. And that's been
a war.
Yeah, or you can have a war. You can start a war.
And
But
get rid of a lot of those people that way.
Well, yes, but in this particular, but it can't be a war that gets so big that it destroys their property. They're like what they own, right? So the oligarchs want a managed regional local war. They don't the World War was bad for the oligarchs. Destroyed a shit ton of property across the world to do it. Okay. So they don't want
you're
that.
missing something here. The oligarchs are not united. They kind of have the same goals. There's factions, there's infighting.
Yeah.
And for a while, the oligarchs, the British aristocracy, was supporting Hitler in the early days. Then they switched, or a different faction took control. There was a lot of
First or Second World War.
Second World War.
Okay.
So there was a lot of elite investment in the infrastructure of Germany. Those guys lost out. The other faction of the elite made a lot of money off of it, or transferred their money to the U.S. So they're not the elite, the oligarchs, the powers that be are not single-minded, all on the same page. There are factions there. And right now, I see the City of London faction, the Davos faction, and I think there is a U.S. faction.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure who the third faction is.
Yeah, and well, the thing to remember though is when you're talking about demographics, the one thing that all three factions agree on is the majority should never be allowed to have access to that kind of wealth.
True.
And
They
I
want to
think
keep their power.
Right.
They want to
exactly.
have immense, they want to have a power differential. They don't want to share power.
Right. So that again, that goes back to what I was saying. They want a war, but they need a war over there. They need a war that doesn't touch them and their stuff too much. They can lose some, but not too much. Same with just
Ukraine,
standard
basically.
finance and assets. They don't mind if the stock market loses 20%. That sucks. It's not a fun day. But at the end of the day, losing 20% of their valuation is going to be, well, I guess I can't buy my second yacht. Right? I'll just have to be content with my current yacht. Oh,
But-
darn.
But money is not wealth. Money is a means to acquire wealth, which is property and assets.
Mhm.
So if the stock market went down by 20%, they haven't lost any assets. They've just lost how the assets are enumerated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, possibly their income stream might go down.
Yeah, it probably.
On the
would,
other
yeah.
hand, it could be an opportunity to buy something else at
Yeah.
a cheaper price so you can actually gain assets. So
Yeah,
again,
they
it's
don't
not
mind 20% down. They don't mind.
no, and that devastates the average person. And
Yes.
and the average person thinks of wealth in terms of money.
Mm-hmm.
The wealthy don't necessarily think that way. They think of it in terms of assets and control and power.
Right. And what we're talking about here is how do we really keep the wealthy from getting access to even more power? Because this might annoy some of the wealthy people, but there is a limited amount of power in the world. It's actually defined by physics for, at a base level. And so when you see these hyper concentrations of power, that's when the really brutal wars start breaking out, because it's, why did we fight over the bush patch or the lakefront, the fishing or the river, right? You could fish, right? You were fighting over access to limited resources. If you call power
Siberia.
right. If you call power just the sum total of the resources available to you, eventually you have these factions that have all the power they're ever going to be able to take from down below, and now they have to fight amongst each other for it. And you can see this in history too. And I realize that I'm sounding very Marxist here, but I'm actually just talking about the history of Europe, for example. Eventually, they ran out of power they could get internally, so you have to go take the physical land of somebody else to get more power for
That's
yourself.
why Germany invaded East, because they needed the bread.
Yes, exactly. So there's two ways to get power. You can take it from the people you already have power over, but then eventually you run out of that, so you have to go take it from somebody else. That is the whole history of Europe. Okay, so now
Again, sometimes you have to call the population so you can keep control.
which they used wars. Man, that idea goes back to the biblical times, calling the population, because you would end up with too many
Pharaoh.
men. Pharaoh. Yeah,
Pharaoh.
yeah. You would end up with too many men, and you need to go. You need fewer men, because the fewer men there are, the fewer men there are to cause problems. And look at what are we doing to men now? We're trying to convince men to take themselves out, really, economically for sure.
Well, that's what
we can,
Cyrus did to the Lydians too. So.
right, yeah. So I don't like we talk about how men are checking out from the economy, and I think that for the oligarchs this looks like a good thing, but when you look at the history of it, it's a great thing until the day it's not.
Well, that's why the marriage laws have not been changed.
Yeah.
It suits the wealthy people to have the families not to families to fail. Because in the U.S., the big pushback against to kind of keep things balanced was men. Men,
Yep.
head of families, voting. This was the Democratic Republic. Men who built their lives and had voting power could unite to counter the wealthy people. And they could keep their wealth and pass it down. Well, now through divorce, they lose their wealth. You split the vote between husband and wife. Men can't unite. You emasculated men, took away their power. Now you don't have opposition to your plan to gain more and more power and control over people. Therefore, you have no reason to make marriage work for the future or to be fair to men. You want to basically enslave men or remove the power of the little guy.
And it also fits, I'll try to be careful in my words, it also fits a certain Paulist / cultist religious warfare that's been documented throughout Catholic and Protestant books and writers up until about the middle of the 19th, early 20th century to keep the ethnos, or the Gentiles, in check, which are subhuman.
You know, there is some truth in that. And I said 10 years ago that discussion of that was going to increase dramatically. And lo and behold, it did. Now, you can be censored if you go too far down that.
Yeah.
But it's commonly talked about. And it's not the only issue. It's not the solution to all our problems.
It's not all of it.
It's a contributing factor.
Yeah.
We also mentioned wealth inequality is a contributing factor. And feminism is a contributing factor. And the loss of faith is a contributing factor. And the weakness of churches is a contributing factor. You know what? This is not an easy thing to solve. And if you think Trump is our savior, what have you been smoking? Now, I know you're conservative, but if you have that delusion, I still think you've been smoking something.
Well, we've been pretty consistent in our view of that. And I think that consistency stems from the fact that the three of us are looking at this problem going, this is really complicated. There's no way that Trump has the mandate to do all the things necessary to fix it. I mean, we talked about the Social Security. Yeah, he doesn't have a mandate to fix that. We talked about legal immigration. He probably does have a mandate to fix that, except from his donor class. Well, okay, so he's not gonna, right? Okay, we've talked about, the property stuff. Yeah, that would require some pretty significant overhauls of things. Nobody has a mandate for that. The amount of re-education you would have to do on the American population to get them to even try to understand what's being talked about here is enormous. And I'm reasonably sure that most of them would not get it, no matter how much education you did.
Well, just look, the three of us are much more informed and educated on this than 99% of people. And we look at it and say, holy shit, this is complicated. I don't quite know what's going on. And I listen to other really smart guys like Alex Craner and Tom Luongo. And they have their takes on things. And yeah, those guys are way smarter than me. And they're going, I don't know. I mean, I see this aspect. I used to be really in favor of Trump. Now I don't know. And he's got a lot of idiots surrounding him. I don't know about this. So, you know what? the smart people in the world can't really figure out how to fix it. The general populace has no hope of ever figuring it out, nor have they ever. You know, we don't need more exceptional people. We just need more disciplined, obedient people.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that, Steve. What you were thinking, how do you solve this? And I think the answer, as close as I'm going to be able to get to it today, is a lot of us, a lot of the intelligent people are going to have to get together with the other intelligent people and say, okay, look, here's what I understand. Here's what I've studied. I understand the problem. And they're going to have to prove that to the other smart people. And they're going to have to say, I'm going to need your guys' support and help on this. In exchange for that, I'm going to listen to what you have to say and your solutions to that problem. And I'm going to have to go for it. I'm not because one of the ways of keeping the intelligent people out of the conversation, there's two ways. First, you can keep them amused by non-political things, like sciences and whatnot. The second way, if they do decide to get involved into politics, is to convince them that they are right and that everyone needs to listen to them about everything. By the way, that's Elon right now. That's Musk right now. One side of this, is trying to convince us that he's the dumbest thing to hit, since a Haitian. And the other side is trying to convince us that Elon has the solution for every problem ever. He does not. He's also not a Haitian. He's actually very intelligent. Okay. But my point here is that they're trying to divide and conquer the intelligent people by saying, well, we only need to listen to this one person. And that's all you need to listen to, because they can control that one person. And they can control it by making sure he doesn't get good information.
But the problem is you can't hyper specialize and know everything about everything.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying.
You can't do that. So you have to have people that are competent in each area.
Right. That's what I'm saying. We need to do. We need to go to the intelligent people and say, okay, you know a lot about this. So right. Professor Baskerville, right? He knows a ton about how that system. I'm blanking, but on how the family court system is tied into the Social Security system. You need him to say, okay, here's the problem I see. Here's how it's affecting the world around us. Here's my solution. The smart people go, that seems reasonable to us. The smart people are not going to be able to know everything about the problem and understand it to the degree he does. But they're smart enough to say that your analysis looks reasonable. Your solution looks reasonable. Go for it. And that's what I mean when I say the smart people, they get together, they sort of hash things out, and then they give each other license to say, okay, go. Trump's not doing that right now.
Let me point something out. The smart people are not the academics. The
Correct.
Smart people are not the people with the credentials. Oh, yes.
Some of them might have
some of those. But we saw that, last week, we listened to, I forget, Dr. Moreland talking about the birth rate.
Yeah.
And talked about education of women, but we can't touch that. Okay. And he had that posh accent. So he only sees certain things. Now, Gary Stevenson, on the other hand, comes from a working class family. As smarter, I don't know. He's
smarter probably.
He's got an undergrad from LSE, London School of Economics, and a master's in economics from Oxford. So he's credentialed. He's not an academic. He comes from a different class. So you need smart people from the various classes. Don't trust, oh, I'm smart, I'm rich, I have all these credentials. Yeah. You view things from your perspective, and for you and your class, everything seems to be going good. The people at the lower end who may not even have a college education, they understand things differently. And you can go and you can find some wicked smart mechanics, truck drivers, farmers. You know, they got to know a lot about equipment and finance and planning and hedging. Some of those are wicked smart guys.
But Steve, they have crap under their fingernails, and I do mean that word literally. They can't and their clothes are dirty. They can't know what they're talking about. They don't look the part. Steve, come on. Sarcasm for the people just listening.
So yeah, I mean, don't hold your breath. This isn't going to happen. Hey, I agree with Gary. Things are going to get worse.
It will happen at some point, but things have to get worse, like a lot worse.
Yeah, in the near term, I mean 5-10 years at least, things are going to get worse.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't come to another conclusion.
2029.
Trump is not going to save us and turn it around. He may pretend to. I'm not even sure that that's his goal.
Yeah, I don't know what his goal is. I mean, he's doing a really good job of wrecking things, which is not all bad. It's a necessary step. But the great destroyer is not also the great builder. It's a different mentality. You know, for a guy to just come in and destroy things, you want somebody who's almost like a detective. They come in, they root around, they see what's going on, and they go, nope, got to destroy that, and they're willing to blow it up.
Yeah, sometimes things are too far gone. You just have to uproot them.
Yeah,
and start over, lay a new foundation.
And I want to point something out. This is actually not that uncommon in American history. The U.S. was born in a great destruction. Remember, prior to the end of the Revolutionary War, all Americans were considered subjects of the king.
Yep.
They considered them all
just not English Parliament. Just not English Parliament.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That was
but the British certainly considered them all subjects of the king, and it was actually referred to as a civil war at the time. Right. This is why I call what we call the Civil War. Is why I call it the Second Civil War.
Yeah.
Because it was a second civil war, and we completely upended our political system during that as well. Not going to get into what we did, but we did. So, and by the way, Roosevelt completely upended our economic system in the 1930s. Okay. And that's you hear Nick occasionally say 80 years and all that. Yeah, well, there's a history of that in the United States of us completely upending our economic systems or something about our systems every 80 to 100 years. It's kind of
at the same time.
That's big in the U.S. It's happened many other places too.
Oh yes, it has. It has.
It's almost a truism.
It's a human. It's a psychology thing.
Yeah.
So, the psychology of humans demands it happen. It's that cycle that you guys hear all the time. You know, weak men create hard times, and they're so on. That's the human psychology driving it. I was talking with a family member earlier today, and I noted that you can find this same cycle in the Bible. If you go look at the history, Kings and Samuel and Judges, you'll find the same cycle in there. So this is not new. The American version of it has a tendency to be particularly loud and destructive, but it's not new. So, to some extent, I look at this and I go, well, this was always happening. There were better ways of managing it than what we're doing now, but even this isn't entirely unexpected. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen, and this is going to piss everyone off, everyone is going to have something they hate about this. The country will come back together and it will form new norms. It'll form a new story about itself. And there's going to be things about it that you personally don't like. When that happened in the 1940s, there were lots of people, particularly in the late 1940s after the end of the war, who were dead convinced that we were just going to go back to the exact same problems of the 1930s because of this thing or that thing. What they missed was that the country had decided on its new set of norms, rules, and they all kind of just agreed. And it was an unspoken thing, but the culture agreed on it. We're not there yet. But there's going to be something about that set that you don't like. There's going to be something about I don't like. There's going to be lots of things that Nick and Steve don't like about that. But when that norming happens is when all this settles down, because now you have an agreed upon moral framework to work from.
And I can predict what's going to happen specifically, but I'm going to be wrong because there's going to be some factor that I overlooked that flips it on its head and makes it opposite.
Steve,
basically all I can predict is there will be chaos.
What I'm trying to say though is that the chaos is necessary because
and women will get desperate.
Oh yes, because the chaos is what forces the culture to come together and create these new norms, these new stories, these new rules, these new legal systems. Even it's necessary. It's important. It's actually a good thing. It's just hell getting through it. And women, I can guarantee there will be things about what is created afterwards that the women do not like. I'll guarantee it. Like they might lose their access to the unfettered divorce. We might look at that Reagan, and that's a Reagan experiment, by the way. And we might look at that and we go, Reagan, sorry, dude, you were just wrong. This is a bit of your legacy that we're just going to have to put back in the box now. You know, like that's
the simping will be fucking over for a generation.
Yeah. Yes, it will.
Well, let's draw this to a close.
And I'm not sorry.
Hopefully we introduced our audience to some new ideas. Went down a bunch of rabbit holes.
We did.
Said it's complicated. We explored the issue. I think the three of us are in agreement that wealth inequality is a problem. And hopefully there'll be some kind of solution to it. Either a chosen solution or a forced solution.
I know where I'm voting. It's going to be a reality imposed solution, not a chosen solution. That's my vote. Y'all can vote accordingly. You have heard evidence from the three of us today.
I agree. It's going to be imposed because you ignore nature for so long, it comes back with a fucking vengeance.
Yeah. Amen. It's true.
So, are people going to accuse me of being a Marxist?
Probably.
Oh,
they'll accuse all of us of. The tradcons. Oh man, I think we painted a target on our backs with this one because we said things that are. Well, yes, but we said things that were very tradcon unapproved. Like we spoke nicely of taxing the rich. Oh, how dare we do that? Well, actually, no. Let me rephrase that. We didn't speak nicely of it. We didn't speak of it in, with absolute hatred dripping from our voices. Personally, I think that the millennials, who are the big voting bloc starting 2028, have pretty much already decided that something like that is going to happen.
I think you're right.
So the tradcons can sit there and piss and moan, but I've been saying this a lot to people about a lot of different things. Like, you think you have a voice? The decision was already made, and it was made years ago. Like,
hey, I have a message to the tradcons. In general, you guys are not rich. Yeah, the taxing the wealthy. It's like people who have like more than $10 million, more than $50 million. Those are the people who are buying up all the crap and competing. Yeah, if you got $1 or $2 million, don't worry about it. You're not that rich.
But Steve, they might be one day. They might be. If they just hustle a little harder, they might be. They don't want to be that.
By God.
That's how they scare you.
Is that, I understand that. Well, I don't want the rich to be taxed because someday I might make $100 million and I don't want to give the government like half of it.
Yeah. I get it. I do.
How likely is that I make $100 million and have to pay the government $50 million?
Well, guys, there's some helpful solutions though. Besides having to do that, increase the sales tax. There's other ways.
Yeah.
Not making the rich have a flat tax rate, and not have ways for the rich to be exempt. Make them fucking pay too. Oh, how about property taxes? Get rid of that so the rich don't just make money off the backs of the people who can't afford property by not being able to afford property taxes and therefore can't pass on the wealth to their children. Oh, there's other ways to do this, guys. Oh, how about stop printing fucking money? Stop having so much massive debt, because guess who gets richer? The rich get richer and the poor get poor.
And interest rates are a wealth transfer from people who have money, or from people who do not have money to people who do, because the rich can afford to own the debt. If you default on your mortgage, it hurts them a little bit. It's the end of the fucking world for you.
This
An end usury.
Inequality at its core, if you keep going down and you realize, where does it come from? It comes from usury. It comes from interest on money. Hey, the Bible, Jesus was against usury.
Yes.
The church used to be against usury.
It's in the Westminster Standards. It's against usury.
There are means of investing without usury. They have to take an equity stake, and it's not a loan. It's an equity stake.
It's shared risk, which is the actual right way to do it. That is the actual right way.
And the Muslims still do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder who they were.
A little bit fast and loose, but.
But you know why they did that, right? There's a certain group of people that was notorious
to not be controlled by another group.
Pretty much. Just saying, they pretty much know why they did that.
I mean, that's why I was somewhat joking earlier on in the stream about, well, do you vote for a bill that's co-sponsored by AOC? Because she's the one talking about putting a cap on interest rates. Right? Guys, if you're going to look for actual solutions to problems, you're going to have to flirt with things that are politically, they cause political indigestion, in part because the political system has been set up to cause you to stop thinking and just choose team red, team blue. They don't want you to think. They just want you to say team blue good, team red bad. And if you do that, you don't think about the various solutions that are being offered, and now they can just do whatever they want because you've already decided, well, everything team blue does is good and everything team red does is bad. No. Actually think about the problem. But you're going to have to entertain some ideas that you look at and go, oh, I don't like that because I'm team shit. If it ever comes down to you're saying, oh, well, I'm a libertarian, so I can't talk about that. Oh, okay. I consider myself to be on the libertarian end of things. So having this conversation tonight has been very, it's been a lot of indigestion. Thank you, Steve. I'm sure my wife will have to tell you about how well we didn't sleep tonight because of the indigestion. So thank you for that.
Okay. Yeah, well. But you also like to be have your ideas challenged, and then have reason to question your own beliefs and refine them. I love that.
I'm not saying
Might not
saying
like
it's
it at the
bad.
time, but
Right.
yeah, I need that once in a while.
Yeah, and you know, like I look at it and you think about the taxation thing, and there are historical data points that make you go, you know, maybe it's not such a bad thing. Now, how you do it can be, and we talked about that. How you do something matters, in my opinion, almost as much as the morality of what you choose to do, because there are good and bad choices, but every choice comes with an implementation.
For
And
instance, the one that we agree on is you don't tax the rich and give to the poor. That's a
yes,
wealth transfer.
No.
Bad
No.
idea. Do not do
Exactly.
that. Because the poor don't have to work. And labor is the source of all wealth.
Yep.
People need to work.
Yep.
You stop all these subsidies of people not working. It's not good for them. It's not good for the economy.
Yep. So, you know, so and the thing is looking back at my political history, I've always understood that at a mental, you know, just like a gut mental level, right? It was many more years before I could put words to it. And but I found myself falling into the trap of team red good, team blue bad. Well, team blue is they might be reacting poorly, but they are reacting to a problem. I can disagree with their solutions all day long, and I do. But the data itself very clearly says that wealth is accruing at the very top. And the data also very clearly says that there's been a stagnation in standard of living increases, health outcomes. We are seeing for the first time in 80 years a decrease in wealth production amongst the younger generations. There's a lot of different reasons that go into that, and so for me, I don't like the solutions of Team Blue, but I'm sitting here going, I cannot argue with some of their descriptions of the problems.
Let me point something out.
Go ahead.
That team has not addressed wealth inequality.
Nope.
At all.
Nope.
Biden didn't do it.
Nope.
If you think that is the party to lead us to the solution,
nope.
Even though they're a little bit misguided now, no. Democrats do not want to address wealth inequality any more than the Republicans, because the Democrats, I mean, this has been said before, they gain their power by keeping people down and keeping the transfer payments.
Oh, yeah.
And look at the black population. Do they really want to solve black poverty? No. Because the blacks would start voting Republican then.
But Steve, here's the Mac. I don't know if that's
Machiavellian.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if it's Machiavellian. It might be, but I don't think it is. But we talked about accelerating the decline.
We did.
Hey, how wicked would it be just to let them have their way and just let inertia take fucking control, so that we can actually.
We took some flack. We took some flack for this idea, guys. We took some flack for this idea. This was an idea that I posed. I didn't say we had to, and I didn't. And I didn't even.
I'm not going to do it, but there's a part of me that's like, gosh, it just needs to fucking collapse faster so we can get to the fucking solution.
Right. So the idea was, I think we did this show back in late October, early November sometime, where I said, okay, well, if you guys really want to force the solution, vote Kamala, because she would take it and collapse it faster. Now, I didn't do that. I don't think any of us did, but it was a thought experiment to say, okay, if we agree that the collapse is coming and we agree that the collapse is necessary, why would we delay it?
A lot of pain up front versus prolonged pain over a long period of time that may actually be worse.
Yeah.
In the end.
So I'm not saying that, as I said, I didn't even participate in that idea myself. It was a thought experiment, but we took a shit ton of flack for it, for putting that out there.
Yeah.
And we'll take flack for this one too, because we did not speak ill of what is traditionally considered Marxist ideas.
I think Marxist is bullshit. But if you want to collapse the system, hey, yeah,
Well,
there you go.
Marxism came about because of what preceded it. And I haven't read Marx or studied it, but I'm sure there are a lot of truth in Marxism, because the best lies are 80% true and 20% lies. So, if you think everything in Marxism is bad or all the ideas are bad, you're probably a bit naive.
Oh, Steve. Oh, I just had an idea.
Sorry. You can what's that?
I just had an idea. Because we've done a show.
Go ahead.
We did a show called The Descriptions Are the Problem, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about, well, the best lie is 80% the truth. What I think I actually heard you say was that the best lie is to get 80% of the descriptions right and then ignore or twist or otherwise corrupt the 20% of the descriptions you don't like, or the descriptions.
Correct.
Tradcons, by the way, that's you. Just saying.
Oh man, you just want to pick today.
The more I deal with Tradcons, the less interested I am in them in general.
So should we be happy before what Lily Phillips or whoever her name was getting a ring or something?
Oh, you saw that? Oh God! No, Nick, don't.
What's the Tradcon reaction to that?
Well, the Tradcon reaction, that's gonna be they're seal clapping. Yay, we won another one. Oh God. Oh God, no, I can't. No. Nick, please don't do that.
I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for what's gonna happen.
You mean the guy gets his shit pushed in?
Oh,
you know what's gonna happen.
Is it gonna be a visit on Michael Knowles' show?
Oh God, no.
Sorry.
I know, Steve. You were trying to wrap things up, and then we just kind of went nuts on you. It's been 2.5 hours.
How's that for economics?
Nick, no, don't say these things, Nick. All right, Steve. I think we're done. Well, Nick might not be done.
Okay, well, I'm not hosting it next week.
Hey, Nick, I heard you have a topic in mind for next week.
I don't even remember which one.
I don't remember which one either.
I had 3 or 4 floating. I might just do a Gal Rock one.
Okay.
Or if I can get a special guest, I'll see if I can. So.
Oh, okay. So Nick's leading next week, but he hasn't decided yet which it's going to be. So we'll find out next week. The week after that, so 2 Wednesdays from now, who had requested that we do an episode on, I'm going to call it propaganda and false preference falsification bubbles, but we're actually going to get into how your opinion of things is manipulated. Remember, we were talking about Team Red versus Team Blue tonight. So that episode would be kind of call back to this, but get more nitty gritty. Like, what are they actually doing to you on Twitter and Facebook, and how are they tracking this stuff, and how can you see that, and what the goal is? I get to bring up my Yuri Bezmenov clip again, because he says something in there that takes on a different meaning when you look into how this stuff actually works. I don't even think he really understood what he was saying. Like he knew it was right, but he didn't understand the various practices being used. So that's 2 weeks from now. And that's a request from our audience, by the way. So we do those. It just might take us a while to get there. Sorry, Shu. We'll get there. Well, is that everything? Any closing thoughts?
That's everything.
All right. We will see you all next week for whatever Nick decides he's going to do next week. And, guys, I'm sure you disagree with stuff we've said, because we've said stuff that Marxists would go, that sounds like a good idea. So if you disagree with something we said, write a comment. If you really want to get into it and have a discussion, we will welcome you up on stage. We don't have or any restrictions against that. It doesn't have to be the three of us. It can be four of us. So yeah, leave us a comment if you have a question, particularly. By the way, there's one for you, Nick, very clearly for you. It's on one of our shorts. So,
Okay.
Yeah. And if you did like what you heard, and particularly if what you heard challenged you, give us a like. And if you would want to be challenged more, we do appreciate subscribers, although we seem to lose as many as we get. So, yeah, whatever. It is what it is. Yeah. And we will see you on Saturday. I have no idea what the plan is for that. I'm sure I will be.
That's how you know we're not politicians, because we're not telling you what you want to hear.
Yeah. Two engineers and an oil man who was a pastor. That's what we are. We're not we're not very politically adept.
Don't want to be.
Oh, okay. Elena's really agitating to do Passport Bros. She's been beating me up for months to do this. I don't want to do this because, but what
You are one. Because you are one.
Oh, I know I am. Well, the other reason to not want to do this is because it's going to make, it's going to make a lot of people mad. As Pearl said when my wife was talking to her months ago, she said, "Oh, you're killing dreams here." And yeah, we're going to kill some dreams. If we do Passport Bros, we're going to kill dreams.
Yeah, okay. Red pill's about reality, not blue pill fantasy. So
I agree.
Yep.
It's going to be another one where, we probably won't gain any subscribers, but we'll probably lose some because there's going to be people who go, "How could you say that? That's not," it's going to be one of those. But if you guys enjoy that kind of stuff, and if you want to learn about Passport Broing from somebody who did it successfully, then join us on Saturday. Apparently, that's what we're doing. So there you go. I think that's all we have for you all today. And we'll see you on Saturday and next Wednesday for the Nick special.
Bye.
Later.
Later.